We're having a brief stay in southern Spain. I've been to this location before, and in previous videos I've taken you out up the dry river valley. We did a nature ramble up there and identified lots of wild plants, and I thought to make a change what we'll do is we'll wander around the campsite and perhaps around the town as well and identify the things that people have planted on purpose. So the typical garden plants and perhaps municipal plants here in southern Spain. Starting with something quite familiar. This is a bay tree, Laurus nobilis. So this is bay leaves. They look a little bit more like bay leaves down there where they have been unclipped at the base. These have been clipped here, these leaves, so they look a bit smaller. This is called Cape honeysuckle. So it has these spectacular red flowers. I think the genus is Tecomauria. There we go, Cape honeysuckle. And we'll have a wander around and see what else we can actually find that's been planted on purpose. So this tree here is a bit of an oddity. The seeds make it look a little bit like an ash tree or a sycamore maybe, or you might think, certainly with the pinnate leaves and the winged seeds, that it might be an ash. But it's a pea family plant called Pride of Bolivia, and unusually for peas the seeds are winged like ash keys or like sycamore wings, but it is a pea family plant, so I wonder if each one of these wings is just a modified pod with one seed in it. I don't know what the flowers look like. We're here in autumn, it's November. So those are the seeds, the winged seeds, very much like sycamore seeds. I don't know if there's one we can have a look at closer on the ground. There we go. So it has these winged seeds which spiral down to the ground slowly, allowing the wind to take them a little bit further away from the tree, perhaps, than they might if they just fell. There are some fan palms down this avenue here. I don't know which species these are. I'll look it up and put it on the screen. And here, a morning glory, related to bindweeds and sweet potatoes. I think probably the prettiest of the family. It is the best colour. These conifers here, these are cypress. We can tell that from the cones. They've got these spherical, weird globular cones which open up a little bit when they're fully ripe. I'll see if I can find one that's ripened and fallen. There we go. So that's a cypress cone. Seeds have been shaken out of that one already. This plant down here, coral creeper it's called. Now I thought that was going to be a mimulus, looking at the shape of the flowers. Just they've got that look to them, but it's not related. So that's called coral creeper. This is mirabilis. This is a 4 o'clock plant. I think it's called the 4 o'clock plant because the flowers either open or close at 4 o'clock, but they're all closed at the moment. It's late morning, so I assume at 4 o'clock in the afternoon we're going to see some fresh flowers. I'll get back and we'll have a look at those. This is lantana, being enjoyed by a bee at the moment. I particularly like this one because it has these dual coloured flowers. They open yellow and fade to pink, followed by purple black berries. The whole plant's quite poisonous actually. I believe the berries, when they're really fully ripe, might be edible, although that is a subject of some debate. There are some unripe berries there. I shan't be trying that one. This one here is a hibiscus. There are several different colours of this on the campsite. I'll show you the other ones a bit later. This flower's a little bit over, but we've got some others elsewhere on the campsite. In fact, I think that's a slightly fresher looking flower there. Look at that. But there are some other hibiscus plants on the campsite. I'll show you those in just a moment. So yeah, this one is aloe vera. Opuntia, that's a prickly pear cactus. Don't touch that. All of those little white dots on there are full of little spines called glochids that get lodged in your skin. This plant is called pig's ear, Cotyledon orbiculata. It is later in the day, but it's not 4 o'clock yet, and the mirabilis 4 o'clock plant is not flowering yet. This plant here, which looks like a palm, is not actually a palm. This is a cycad, and this one is fruited. All these rattly, hard fruits here. They're quite difficult to germinate, I understand. Here's another shrub ornamentally planted here in a hedge. This is called bee-still tree. It's a relative of oleander. Again, a lot of the plants we're going to look at probably in this video are quite toxic, but it's called bee-still tree. There is only the very, very slightest breeze blowing at the moment, and you can see the flowers and the leaves are trembling. I imagine that's why it's called bee-still tree, because the very, very slightest of air movements will cause the leaves and especially the flowers to move around like this. Here's a tree commonly planted for shade in the Mediterranean. This is a mulberry. I'm not quite sure which species of mulberry these are, but these are mulberry trees. Big, slightly asymmetric, heart-shaped leaves. Could be black mulberry, red or white mulberry, not sure. So I think it must be 4 o'clock and the flowers are all open. This is an interesting plant in that it's quite common for it to have 2 different coloured flowers on the same specimen. Sometimes just because the flowers are variegated in colour here. So we've got white with streaks of pink, and then pink, pure pink, different random pattern there. But sometimes on these plants you can get like yellow and pink flowers on the same plant, just because it does this variable mixing. So sometimes you get a yellow background with pink, and when they mix together you get an orange. So you have orange, deep pink, and then yellow as well on the same plant. So several things here. One is a fig tree, and this climbing all over the fig tree is a blue passion flower, Passiflora caerulea. No flowers in evidence. Oh yeah, there's one there. So perhaps if we come back later in the day we might see those open. And of course there's lots of citrus trees, and these are sweet oranges, as you can tell from the leaves. We'll have a look at the sour oranges they typically plant on streets in a little bit later in the video. I mean, I'll show you how you can tell the difference quite easily without tasting the fruit. Another cycad here with all the fruits hanging off it. Kind of looking quite Lovecraftian. So the first of the kind of street trees I want to look at is this one. This is called the white lead tree. It's a kind of mimosoid. It's in the pea family, as you can probably tell from the foliage, but if you can't tell from the foliage, you can certainly tell from the seed pods, which are very typical beans. So this is called the white lead tree. Yeah, it has these little flattish bean-like seeds in there. Usually you find bigger specimens of this standard trees with a, you know, a trunk, a distinct trunk, and then branching out from the top. These are probably self-seeded here. In fact, you can see lots more of them over there. Quite a good shade tree, so planted on streets quite often. So here's what happens if you don't maintain a fan palm tree. So all of the dead foliage just droops down and covers the trunk like that. So this is a fan palm, and the seeds are all over the paving here. The seeds are a little droop, so like a tiny coconut really. So it's a fleshy outer casing with a hard seed inside. Probably Mexican fan palm, so Washingtonia robusta, I should think. So here again, I think we've got more mulberries, although I'm not familiar with the leaf form of that one, so I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure that is a mulberry. or maybe fig, they're in the same family. So here's a more typical specimen of that white lead tree when it's a specimen that's been planted. So this is a standard tree or thereabouts. So got a proper trunk and a crown. And actually we can see that there are not only the beans here, we've got the little flowers, which are little fluffy greenish white pom-poms. And then here we've got that pride of Bolivia again, with its winged seed pods, an example of which you'll find there. Okay, and then just here we've got citrus trees. Now these are orange trees, but they're not sweet oranges. These are Seville oranges, marmalade oranges. They produce bitter fruit that is used for marmalades, for perfumery, candied peel perhaps. How do I know that these are Seville oranges? Well, I'll show you. I mean, actually you can't really tell from the fruit because the fruit are pretty bad condition. But if we could find a ripe fruit, it would be kind of knobbly and thicker, but that's not the key indicator. Let me see if I can find a decent looking fruit to look at though. So yeah, no, we're not going to be able to tell from the fruit directly because they're not ripe enough yet, but we'll have a look at the leaves. So here's how we can tell it's Seville oranges. They typically have these double leaves. See, there's a little sort of leaf-like blades on the petiole, and so if you look all the way over the tree, all of the leaves are like that. They have this double leaf form, and that's a fairly sure indicator. I mean, other citruses do that, but Seville oranges do that very predominantly, whereas sweet oranges just have a simple single leaf. And of course olive trees are quite commonly planted on the street, although more commonly in a place like this where they're in the middle of a patch of grass, because when all of those olives fall off, I mean, it's not likely somebody will come and harvest these olives. When these fall off, they would make a terrible mess of the pavement, a slippery mess at that. But yeah, very nice healthy looking olive trees full of olives. And in case you're wondering why I'm not tasting one of these olives, they're incredibly bitter and unpleasant until they've been properly processed. So olives have to be salted, brined, fermented or pickled before they're edible. And then over here we've got clearly a date palm of some sort with lots of dates on it. And yeah, I think that is just a regular old date palm. So there's dates all over the pavement here. And I'm not going to pick one of these up and eat them either. But these look like regular sweet dates. And there's more up there on the trees being enjoyed by the birds. Well, we couldn't really come here without looking at this. This is oleander. It's a double flowered form, so we can't really appreciate the simplicity of a typical oleander flower. Normally it's just your 5 petals in a little spiral whorl, but this is a double flowered with extra petals in place of some of the other structures. But that's oleander. Actually, this is another one that's really quite poisonous. And then that's a big yucca. Yucca filamentosa, possibly. We've got a very big Opuntia prickly pear with a nearly ripe fruit on it right there. And another one down there. And down there. I found a ripe fruit on one of these once and picked it and prepared it as carefully as I could, and I got one of the little spiny glockids out of these pads, or rather out of the pads on the fruit. I got it stuck in my lip and it hurt for a month. There's no way of taking it out, no way of finding it, and so it just hurt and hurt. Now I don't know what this plant is here, with little yellow berries and beautiful purple flowers. Let's have a look at the flower. Don't know, but let's see if we can identify that. It's very pretty purple flowers, the best colour, and little orange berries. Let's see if we can identify it. So there is a bit of this happening off camera, so in case you mistake me for someone who really knows what they're talking about. So the things where I say I don't know what that is and then come back in the next scene and tell you what it is what I'm doing, which is perfectly safe to do. You know, may have heard me talk about not trusting apps before. I certainly wouldn't trust solely an app to tell me what was edible. But we're not planning to eat this today. So this is called a skyflower. And what a lovely name for a pretty little plant. And viewing the species, let's have a look. Duranta erecta. Oh, it's in a verbena family. Yeah, I suppose I should have probably got that. I'll take a nice picture so you can see that properly. Another big hibiscus here, but not with any fully open flowers. That's the nearest we get. And again, big, I can't remember the species, but that's definitely hibiscus. And then here we've got, is this bougainvillea? Yes, I think it is. Well, it's quite a shrubby one. Normally this is a bit of a climber, but this looks like a shrubby version of bougainvillea. I will just check I've got that right, but I'm pretty sure that's what that is. It's not normal to see it in this growth habit. It's normally more of a, or trained normally as a climber. Let's just make sure I am. Yeah, this is bougainvillea. So this might be a different species of bougainvillea to the one that's most commonly planted as a climber. So this is how I'm more accustomed to seeing bougainvillea present itself, as more of a sort of sappy, vining climber, as here. So that other one we saw must have been a more shrubby form, I think, or possibly a different species. So back at the campsite now, because I think there's one or two more things we could have a look at just before we wrap up this video. So here are a couple of bougainvilleas that are more typical of what I would expect them to look like. So they're more of a vine than a stout shrub. So a pink one and a red one, that's kind of the range of colours. It goes from pale pink as well. You can get whitish pale pink ones. In fact, I think I see one over there. We're going to have a look at that in a minute. Interestingly, the pink bit is not the flower. That's the flower there, that little white thing in the middle. These coloured bits here are bracts, modified leaves. In fact, you can really see that they are. Often when botanists might tell you, oh no, that's not a petal, it's a bract, you can't always tell. But these you can definitely see that that's just a leaf that's been modified to resemble petals. Not the petals themselves, modified leaf structures. I mean, it's all the same really, but it's a question of what order the plant did it in. But yeah, so there we go, bougainvillea. There's a slightly redder one here, I think. So that was kind of dark, that was magenta and then dark cerise. Here's a slightly more scarlet one and another pink one. And then over here there's a pink one with lots of flowers, including a more shrubby one as well. So we've got a mass of flowers on this pink one, and then one with very pale pink, almost white bracts there. Gotta say, I don't like that one quite so much. It's not quite as showy. This one's what you typically see a bougainvillea looking like. And then here we've got this plant with the blue flowers. Blue flowers do exist. Plumbago. Sometimes grown as a windowsill plant. But yeah, so plumbago, beautiful blue flowers. And then down here is a plant which you may be more familiar with, seen as a pot plant in offices. So this is weeping fig. This is Ficus benjamina. Yeah, very commonly grown as a pot plant in offices and waiting rooms and things like that. But here, growing as a tree, and it will grow to be quite a big tree if it's allowed to. Weeping fig is closely related to the banyan tree actually, so it will become a really, really large tree if it's permitted to. This one's a variegated form, but it has also some non-variegated branches, so perhaps it's been grafted and it's grown out from below the graft as well. And so this bit here that's not variegated might be a sprout that's come from below the graft union, and the variegated variety that's been grafted on top is the main part of the growth. It seems to bear out with the fact that I'm only seeing the non-variegated leaves at the bottom. Here's an example of the very same tree. This is Ficus benjamina, weeping fig. Obviously been there a bit longer, and that's now a very large spreading tree. But exactly the same thing that you saw earlier, and the same thing that you see growing in small pots in offices and waiting rooms. So that's the little tour of commonly planted trees and shrubs in this part of southern Spain, at least the ones I've encountered on this particular trip. I hope that's been interesting. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.